Hello, class, and welcome back to part 4 of the chapter in Transport in Humans. In part 4, we're going to look at the heart. The heart lies in the chest region between the two lungs. It is made up of special muscles which contract and relax regularly throughout life. So, contract means it is squeezing, and relax means it is not squeezing. And these are the parts to the heart. The heart has four chambers or four rooms or four spaces, if you want to think about it like that. So the heart has two upper chambers, and it's called the left atrium and the right atrium. But together, they are called the atria, not the atriums. Okay, it's the atria. And then they have two lower chambers here, and these are called ventricles. So you have the left ventricle and the right ventricle. And then you have something called the septum in the middle. The septum is just a muscular wall that separates the left and the right chamber. So the septum is just a boundary. So it separates the left from the right. Why is there a septum? So that the blood on the left side do not mix with the blood on the right side. The blood on the left side is oxygenated. So the blood from here is oxygenated because it comes from the lungs. And then the blood on the right side here is deoxygenated because this is the blood that is coming from the body. The atria push blood into the ventricles. So you can see blood coming from here, from the left atrium, goes into the left ventricle. And then blood from the right atrium goes to the right ventricle. This doesn't need a lot of force, so the atria has thin walls. So you see the atria, the left atrium and the right atrium, they are smaller and thinner when compared to the right ventricle and the left ventricle. You can see the left ventricle is quite thick and the right ventricle is also thicker than the atrium. The ventricles, on the other hand, have to push blood out of the heart. So blood that is in the left ventricle now has to be pushed out to the body, whereas blood from the right ventricle has to be pushed out to the lung. Now, because they have to push out the blood to all the other parts of the body, they need a lot of force, and so the walls have to be thicker. It has to be very muscular, so that's why the walls are thicker. Okay, because they have to push the blood very strongly. Okay, they need a lot of muscle in the walls. Question is, why is the left ventricle, you can see, has a thicker muscle or wall than the right ventricle? Because the left ventricle has to pump blood around the whole body, but the right ventricle pumps blood only to the lungs. So to this side, it goes to all the parts of the body, which can be quite far, but the right ventricle only goes to the lungs, which is nearby. And then the heart has four valves. So valves are like opening. They open and they close. So you have the semilunar valves and the heart valves. And the valves ensure that the blood flows only in one direction in the body. It prevents blood from flowing backwards. So the blood from the left ventricle only flows in one direction through the semilunar valves, and the blood from the right ventricle flows one direction only through the heart valves. Okay, so it doesn't flow backwards. If it flows backwards, then you're going to have a lot of problems. The heart valves are held in position by cord-like structures called tendons. So there's a tendon here, and then you have also another tendon here. So how does the heart pump blood? So first, you can see the atria and ventricle relax. Okay, so they are relaxing. When they are relaxing, blood flows into the heart from the veins. So this is relaxed. After that, what the atria does, you can see the atria will contract. So it'll push the blood into the left ventricle and the right ventricle. In other words, the left atrium and the right atrium will push the blood into the left and right ventricle like this, you can see. Okay, so the atria contracts, they will squeeze, they will push. The blood is pumped from the atria into the ventricles, And in this case, the heart valves are open. So you can see this one, the valves, they are open. And then after that, once that happens, now it's the ventricles turn to push or contract. So you can see after the atria contract, the ventricles contract. So when the ventricles contract, the blood is pumped from the ventricles to the arteries. So it goes out of the heart. The semilunar valves are open. So the valves here you can see are open, whereas the heart valves are closed. So you can see this one is closed, this one is closed, so that it prevents the blood from going back to the atrium. So when blood leaves, the semilunar valves close. So on the whole, it looks like this, okay? So you can see. So in summary, what do you need to know from this video lesson? You need to know the names of the chambers of the heart. You have the left atrium, the right atrium, and together these two are called the atria, not the atriums. It is the atria. That's the plural word for the atrium. And then you have two lower chambers called the right ventricle and the left ventricle. And then you have the septum, which goes right in the middle. And then you have the valves, the semilunar valves, and also the heart valves. This one and this one are the semilunar valves. This one and this one is the heart valves. And then lastly, make sure you know how the blood flows. So the blood flows from the lungs to the left atrium, and then from the left atrium to the left ventricle. And then from the left ventricle, the blood moves to the rest of the body. Okay? And then once the blood moves to the rest of the body, the blood then goes back to the heart and into the right atrium. And then from the right atrium, the blood goes to the right ventricle. And then from the right ventricle, the blood goes back to the lungs. So this is the flow of the blood from the lungs back to the heart, and then to the rest of the body, and then back to the heart, and then back to the lungs. So it's a cycle. In part 5, we're going to talk more about the blood vessels.